today's edition of ANIGAMEZONE. I'm Danny Gameboy as the host, and I'm going to introduce to the panel. Okay then, in the panel we've got forestlock. How you doing, man?
How's it going?
Yeah, how you doing? We've got Shintai123. Are you, man?
Yo, I'm good.
We've got here as well Johnny T1. How you doing, man?
What's up, guys? Good.
Right, okay, today's topic on the panel, we're going to be discussing about Resident Evil 5. We're going to be looking at the storyline, the gameplay, the differences between the sequels and how does it relate to the Resident Evil series. We're also going to be looking at the good things and the bad things about the game. Right, so to start off with, we are going to discuss more or less the history of Resident Evil and how does it relate to this to Resident Evil 5. Right, so let's get started with this, and we'll start off with forestlock. So what's your overview on Resident Evil 5, and how do you think it relates to all the other Resident Evils?
I think it relates pretty well. The game is really consists majority of Chris Redfield from the original Resident Evil series. Now, when it starts out, he basically goes on what we call, of course, over a series of Resident Evil games that are connected together. Now, Resident Evil 5 actually spans across 10 years from the original game. And the story is mounted on Umbrella, which is a corporation that is involved with the zombie outbreak in Raccoon City, which occurred in 1998. The mansion, which was infected in 1996. And of course, the Here and Now, which is in Africa, which is in 2009. So we basically have the span of different parts of the world being infected by Umbrella as far as the whole T-virus outbreak, and new viruses that are coming along from the Granados, from 4, etc. So I think, as far as story-wise, this is a really interesting concept as far as what Capcom has brought to the table for the new part of the series, which is 5. So that's pretty much what I have on the story and everything. Overall, I think it's pretty good.
So you would say that Resident Evil 5 is some sort of a recap on the Resident Evil series?
Actually, it is. Particularly when you have, in a sense, Chris Redfield, Claire Redfield, Jill, and the other cast of characters. Leon is actually introduced in 5 as well because of the incident in 4 with the outbreak there. He brings up stuff from the past so that people who are new to Resident Evil franchise, particularly 5 for the first time, they will kind of get an understanding of how the game works out, won't get lost in the story whatsoever, and still feel like they're familiar with the series.
Okay then. Okay, so that's an input on the history of Resident Evil and how it's connected to Resident Evil 5. Okay, I'm gonna talk to Forrest. I'm gonna talk to Shintai123, man. What do you think about the characters? How do you see the characters, and how do you think they've developed over the recent years with Resident Evil?
I think the characters are very well developed. They have very distinct personalities, and you can kind of feel their plight as they're going through trying to survive in each game. Like in the original, you could choose between playing as Joe Valentine or Chris Redfield, and even though by today's standards it's a pretty cheesy game in terms of like the voice acting, and even back then it was too, but you still felt something for the characters because they were still pretty well developed. And even more so now, especially when you jump up to Resident Evil 4, you have the relationship between Leon Scott Kennedy and the president's daughter, Ashley. Now, as the game progresses, you could sort of feel the connection between the two, and you feel that more of you feel more inclined to protect her because you know, you develop feelings for for a character, and you know, I think Capcom has done an excellent job with the characters.
Okay, so that's cool. So um, like comebacks, for example. So in Resident Evil 5, who can you tell everybody about comebacks and new characters?
In Resident Evil 5, they bring back Chris Redfield, and basically he was the protagonist in the first game, and he made some cameo appearances in the other games, but he was mostly only the main character in the first game. So it's nice to have him back in heading the game in this one. Since it's in Africa and he has a new partner, her name is Shiva, it's mostly a bunch of new faces. However, like forestlock said, there's a lot of flashbacks, so it goes back and it shows a lot of old faces like Wesker, and they bring back those characters, and gives you a lot of insight on them as well.
So if you're saying so the main character is been there since the original series. Did he start off as a Star agent, or was he because now apparently he's part of the BSAA? What does that relate to with Star then? Or was he always a member of Star, or was he always a member of the BSAA?
I'm not entirely sure about that. I think forestlock would know more about that.
Because so can we just move on back to forestlock for a second? So what's your input about, like, for example, in the beginning of the game, did he appear as part of the BSSA, or was he a member of STARS?
In the first game, he was part of STARS, and what I think what happened was he was first part of STARS, and then he left, and then he joined the BSAA,
which is down as Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance, or he joined a different organization, because we all know that STARS is part of the Umbrella Corporation.
Yeah.
Has a security. They're like the Umbrella's own security.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, then, so that's the characters that we've covered there more or less. Right then, gameplay. Let's talk about the gameplay, and I'm going to move on to Johnny T1. How you doing, man?
Good, are you?
Right. Okay then. So what's your input with the gameplay with Resident Evil 5, and how does it compare with the old Resident Evils? Has it changed? Is it better? Is it worse? What do you think?
Well, when you look at the old games, they're kind of like running really slow, and then you're like stuck in one spot, which kind of has been saying the same. But it's always kind of like your character always look, kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but clunky, I guess. In like Resident Evil 2 and 3, like when they're spinning around, like holding the gun out, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, it didn't feel so smooth so much in the beginning, and then in Resident Evil 4 it really picked up, with his over-the-shoulder thing, and having quick commands to do certain actions and certain sequences. But as for Resident Evil 5, I haven't really played the demo so much, nor have I bought the game. So, I don't really know much about it, but what I've noticed is you can't run and shoot yet, which, I think is fine, because even though people have been complaining about it, I think what's good about it is it's always kept the same feel of, like, because if you ran and shoot while playing Resident Evil, it wouldn't be Resident Evil. It would just be, like, it would be way too easy, and for another thing, it like, kind of brings, it's not like you have zombies rushing you, it's a bunch of zombies run, like, really slow at you, it's not like you really need to run and shoot. And it's just like the style the game's always had.
So basically you would be saying that first impressions for somebody who's just joining the Resident Evil series is their first impressions would be like, well, it really hasn't changed much, hasn't it? Is that what
it's changed very little. Like the first 3, there wasn't really much of a change, and 4 was the biggest change, but it wasn't like a drastic change. There's a couple little things here and there, and just things being smoothed out, and and so on.
And
And
so 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 what would you say about the so that's the gameplay covered more or less. So what would you say about the graphics and how is it being developed?
well, as far as the graphics for the whole series, I think have always been at a good part for its time, especially the first one. Both the Saturn and the PlayStation versions looked very good. And another thing they did is they had the CG cutscenes, which were very new at the time. And Resident Evil.
Being developed.
Well, as far as the graphics for the whole series, I think have always been at a good part for its time, especially the first one. Both the Saturn and the PlayStation versions looked very good. And another thing they did is they had the CG cutscenes, which were very new at the time. And Resident Evil 2 kind of took it further, and especially Resident Evil 2 on the 64. You know, like looking at that, if you've ever seen that, you have 400 CG on a cartridge, and all the voice acting's on there, but that's so like it showed that they can have the graphics on a smaller format. And another thing is going to Resident Evil 4, a lot of things are smoothed out, and that again, like the zombies, they weren't as recycled as they were. Like not the same model was used, and the environments were a little more distinctive. Because it went more from a city environment to kind of like a wilderness environment in the fourth one. And then 'cause, like I've only played the PC version of Resident Evil 4. I haven't seen it on the consoles. My PC's not really that great, so I mean I don't really have much of a say in how good that game looked. But I remember seeing screenshots and videos when it first came out, and I was really surprised that this is being put on the GameCube, instead of like the Xbox or something like that. And also Resident Evil 5, when I played the demo of it, I'm on a standard definition TV, so I don't really have much to say about that. But also on standard definition, it looks pretty solid for that. It looks better than most games on a standard definition TV.
Okay, so do you think so? Just to finalize on this topic, on this bit, do you think that Resident Evil 5 is taking full advantage of the 360's power, or what, or 360's capabilities, basically?
Well, I'm not playing it on 360, so I mean, I think it's taking as much advantage of PS3s as we've seen as before, but I don't think anybody's really taking full advantage of PS3. 360, I'm not so familiar as I don't own one, but I know a lot of people who own them and I've played it before, and I think it looks better than most 360 games.
Okay, that's cool. Then that's cool. Okay, so I'll just go back to forestlock as well here, and a question I have here: when the game was featured as a trailer in the E3 show back in 2007, there was a lot of controversy because on the trailer it featured a white character killing and massacring black zombies and stuff like that, and it was said that the game was just far too violent. And what would you say about that? On those sort of claims?
I would have to say honestly that, and it's going to come up in any game whether it's violent or not, and I think it just really is based upon person to per person basis. But what I really think is that it's not that people had a problem with it, more or less. I think it was just something people just had an issue with. And I think it dates a lot back to history and other things that has a connection to this. But I really think that they've added characters in besides that other problem, so we don't have that sort of an issue that we did when it first came up in E3. So
Yeah.
I think they kind of corrected that problem, so I don't think we're going to see that issue right now. It shouldn't be as bad.
Okay, that's cool. Shintai123, what do you think about the music and the atmosphere of this game? When you play Resident Evil 5, do you really get that feeling that you really are in that sort of an environment? Does the music and the environment give you that feeling? What do you say?
Well, in Resident Evil 5, I think the atmosphere feels very different in comparison to the older games, which had a more dense atmosphere. It felt more claustrophobic, or I think it felt more close together. In Resident Evil 5, it feels more open, but you're outside and the sun is, shining and beaming on you. And it's a very different type of atmosphere. I wouldn't say either one is better than the other, but I think it's good. I think it's a good atmosphere. And I also like the music in Resident Evil. It's pretty good music. I think that's one thing that Resident Evil has always been consistently good at is the music. It's always had very nice, orchestra to it.
Okay then. So to finalize this panel, because we've covered just about all the topics that can feature in the game. I'm just going to ask everybody now just to give the overall view now. So forestlock. So what would be your overview then on this game? Your overall, 1 out of 10. What would you say Resident Evil has earned itself, and how far do you think it's gonna go?
Well, just really quick on that. Normally, I do my reviews not based upon any rating system, but just based upon how I see the game. Yeah. Particularly with 5, it's online compatible, a great idea for the 360 and the PlayStation 3, a really good shot online, and if you know a lot of players, it's a really good game to try out, especially if you're new to the Resident Evil series, so I'd say great on that, and a really good job co-op wise. But AI, it needs improvement, but it's not bad.
So what's your recommendations to the viewers out there? So what would you say to them?
I'd say go for this game. If you're a really big fan of shooters, third person, with great action, and this game has it, definitely go for Resident Evil 5.
That's looking cool.